Numerous individuals ponder whether there exist ancient Egyptian records referencing the Exodus, the plagues in Egypt, and the liberation of the Hebrew people, including their departure from Egyptian lands. Indeed, there are certain manuscripts that appear to provide ancient archaeological proof. In this presentation, I aim to introduce the renowned Ipuwer Papyrus, which details the plagues in Egypt and the emancipation of enslaved individuals who exited the nation. Be prepared for an upcoming video on the channel concerning the Ipuwer Papyrus and the plagues in Egypt. The most pivotal occurrence in the book of Exodus undeniably revolves around the emancipation of the Israelites from Egypt, characterized by the 10 plagues that befell the Egyptians and the parting of the Red Sea. Various timelines have been suggested to determine the date of the Exodus and the departure of the Hebrews from Egypt. The most popular proposal suggests a time around 1290 BC, although this hypothesis has faced challenges and is no longer widely embraced. This is partially due to fresh interpretations of the biblical text and archaeological findings indicating the presence of Israel in Canaan circa 1200s BC. The timeline most consistent with the biblical narrative places the Exodus in the mid-14th century BC, roughly 3,450 years ago. An ancient manuscript called the Ipuwer Papyrus, scribed in Egyptian hieratic script during the 19th dynasty of Egypt, is presently housed at the Rijksmuseum van Oudheden in Leiden, Netherlands. This papyrus, containing the admonitions of Ipuwer, is an unfinished literary piece and a topic of scholarly discourse. The Ipuwer Papyrus is among the most contentious documents as it references plagues in Egypt, the flight of slaves and the Nile River transforming into blood, events closely linked to the biblical Exodus account. The unearthing of the Ipuwer Papyrus transpired in the initial half of the 19th century, a period marked by numerous discoveries of ancient Egyptian artifacts in Egypt, often by traders or scholars seeking swift gains. This papyrus was found by these untrained traders, who subsequently sold it to Giovanni Anastasi, then consul in Egypt for Sweden and Norway in 1828. Anastasi eventually sold the papyrus to the Dutch government, in terms of the Ipuwer Papyrus, which actually takes the form of a poem. The name Ipuwer was quite prevalent in Egypt during the 18th dynasty, and even in earlier eras, such as circa 1850 BC and 1450 BC. This historical context renders the name Ipuwer significant within a more specific chronology related to the Exodus. Within the text, Ipuwer expresses sorrow over the world being turned upside down. A woman who previously lacked possessions now owns furniture. A young woman who once gazed at her reflection in water now possesses a mirror. And a once wealthy man is now impoverished. He calls upon the Lord of all, a title attributed to both the king and the sun god Ra, to vanquish his foes and uphold his religious duties. This parallels the Exodus period when many Egyptians rebelled against their gods for failing to shield them during the plagues. The narrative then vividly depicts chaos. Societal norms are disregarded, even to the extent of desecrating the burial of the king in the pyramid. The poem proceeds to reminisce about better times until it is abruptly cut off, as the final section of the papyrus is missing. It is conceivable that the poem concluded with a response from the Lord of all, or a prophecy regarding the arrival of a mighty king who would restore order. Later on, I will delve into other segments of the Ipuwer Papyrus to provide additional insights into this captivating document. Turning to the timeline relevant to the Ipuwer Papyrus, scholars have dated it to no earlier than the 19th Egyptian dynasty, around 1250 BC. This indicates that the papyrus was crafted during this era and might reflect events from a more remote past. While some propose that the text alludes to occurrences dating back to around 1800s BC, this notion is improbable considering the papyrus's creation in 1250 BC. Therefore, it likely refers to ancient times, albeit not as ancient as some theories suggest. When discussing the correlation between the Ipuwer Papyrus and the biblical narrative of the Exodus, Ipuwer has often been highlighted in popular literature as a potential confirmation of the events detailed in the Book of Exodus. This is primarily due to its reference to the river is blood, a depiction that corresponds to the Nile turning into blood during the Egyptian plague, alongside its frequent mentions of servants and slaves fleeing Egypt. Nevertheless, the majority of scholars do not subscribe to the idea that the Ipuwer Papyrus reflects the era of the Exodus or the plagues recounted in the biblical text. Many archaeologists and Egyptologists dismiss this link chiefly because the conventional belief situates the Exodus during the reign of Ramses II, a viewpoint they deem incorrect. In actuality, the pharaoh who opposed Moses and resisted the plagues would not have been Ramses II, but rather Thutmose III. The involvement of his father, Thutmose II, is also acknowledged, as he issued the decree to kill infants, while Thutmose III was the one who confronted Moses, God, and the Egyptian plagues. As I explore the Ipuwer Papyrus further, I now exclusively present a comparative analysis between it and the narrative of Moses' Exodus. I will examine various passages from the Ipuwer Papyrus alongside excerpts from the Book of Exodus. Enjoy this content as it provides compelling evidence for the reality of the Exodus. The Ipuwer Papyrus vividly depicts the plague, stating, "Blood is everywhere. The Nile overflows, but it remains uncultivated. The dead are buried in the river, turning its current into a grave. The river runs red, its foul odor repelling those who seek to drink from it. This water, once a source of joy, now breeds despair. What can we do? All lies in ruins." This account is compared with Exodus 7:20-21 and verse 24, where all the waters of the river turned to blood. The fish died, the river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink from it. Blood covered all of Egypt. They dug wells along the river to find water, for the Nile was undrinkable. Similarly, the Ipuwer Papyrus mentions, "Magical words and spells are found in sacred chambers, yet prove useless when repeated by the people." Let's consider Exodus 8:18-19, where the magicians tried to produce lice with their enchantments but failed. Here, the magicians' powers falter in the face of the plague of lice, demonstrating their inability to replicate it. Furthermore, the Ipuwer Papyrus describes a scene of devastation. Gates, columns, and walls are ablaze. The royal house stands deserted, lacking servants and slaves. While the house once teemed with provisions, now the land is barren, resources depleted, and inhabitants left to scavenge. People subsist on waterlogged grass, with no grain or grass to be found. Yesterday's abundance is today's absence. The land lies desolate, linen uncut. This portrayal mirrors the chaos wrought by the plagues in Egypt, echoing the suffering detailed in Exodus. A notable resemblance emerges with the plague of fiery hail in Exodus 9:23-26, 31-32, and chapter 10 with hail scorching. The Ipuwer Papyrus similarly records columns, gates, and walls consumed by fire. Hail struck all of Egypt, devastating the land and its inhabitants. The grass withered, trees shattered. Once again, we see parallels with the Ipuwer Papyrus, describing the scarcity of essential resources like barley, wheat, birds, and fish, with people resorting to waterlogged grass for sustenance, while birds struggle to find food. The alignment with the events in the Book of Exodus is striking. Continuing the examination of Exodus, we find that in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites dwelled, there was no hail. The flax and barley were ruined, being in the stage of earing and flowering, but the wheat and spelt were unharmed as they had not yet sprouted. Every green thing had perished. No tree or grass remained throughout Egypt. Once again, we note the striking resemblance when the Ipuwer Papyrus laments that barley has perished on every road, yesterday's sights are gone, and the land lies deserted due to infertility. Moving on with the Ipuwer Papyrus, indeed the herds of goats wail in sorrow, Cattle bellow due to the land's distress, while flocks roam aimlessly without shepherds, bewildered, and no one can gather them, each trying to reclaim those bearing his mark. Let's compare this with Exodus 9:3, 19 and 21. The hand of the Lord will strike your livestock in the fields with a severe pestilence. Gather your livestock to safety, for any human or animal left outside will perish in the hailstorm. Those who disregarded the Lord's warning left their servants and animals in the fields. The Ipuwer Papyrus also notes that the day did not break. Echoing Exodus 10:22, a dense darkness covered all of Egypt for 3 days. Regarding the plague of the firstborn, the Ipuwer Papyrus recounts, the sons of the highborn are dashed against walls. Noble children are forsaken in the streets. The population dwindles, and burial scenes unfold everywhere, with groans and lamentations echoing across the land. Notice the stark similarity between the book of Exodus and the Ipuwer Papyrus. Exodus 12:29 records, every firstborn in Egypt, from Pharaoh's heir to the captives, even the animals were struck down. A great cry arose in Egypt, for not a house was untouched by death. The connection between this great cry and the profound lamentations in the Ipuwer Papyrus mirrors Exodus's account of the firstborn's demise. Lastly, the Ipuwer Papyrus intriguingly mentions, indeed, precious metals adorn the slave women's necks: gold, lapis lazuli, silver, turquoise, carnelian, and bronze. This contrasts with Exodus 12:35-36. The Israelites asked the Egyptians for silver, gold, and garments, and they were granted what they requested, thus despoiling the Egyptians. Some scholars believe that the Ipuwer Papyrus aligns closely with the plagues described in the Exodus and offers a significant connection to the text attributed to Moses. From my point of view, it is highly plausible that the Ipuwer text is a reproduction of a diary from the period of the Exodus, possibly discovered in a library or within the residence of a scribe. Given the deep respect Egyptians had for history and literature, viewing them as sacred acts of devotion to their gods, it stands to reason that the Ipuwer Papyrus, dating back to 1250 BC, could be a transcription of an earlier document from around 1444 BC, when the plagues are believed to have taken place, or 1447 BC, a period in which the name Ipuwer was prevalent during the 18th dynasty. In my honest and heartfelt opinion, the Ipuwer Papyrus offers conclusive evidence of the historical reality of the Exodus and the plagues in Egypt, acting as a crucial archaeological artifact that confirms the existence of Moses and the events surrounding the plagues. I appreciate everyone who has watched this video. May God bless you all, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.